Hello, my name is Rory Dippold, and I'm going to be leading this professional development on National History Day. You can reach me at any time using my email, dippoldr@ftcps.org. So one of the goals of this presentation is to make you not feel like this. Instead, I'm hoping that at the end of this, you'll feel more like this, providing a clear path of what NHD looks like and different ways you can implement it. This presentation is not meant to introduce, not to fully say that you can implement and you'll know everything by the end of this presentation. So the goals of this participation or this presentation, you're going to be introduced to this year's theme. You're going to learn ways to select and refine topics to fit the year's theme. You're going to understand or know some different ways to engage in research, have your students engage in research, and also understand the different formats of History Day. So National History Day has been in the United States for over 40 years. It's become international. Over 700,000 students participate every year. And it is something that I've been doing for 11 years, and I love it because it really gets kids excited about history. This year's theme, this upcoming year, 2017-2018, the theme is conflict and compromise in history. So when approaching this topic, I would actually have students generate what does conflict look like in history? What is compromise? And depending on the structure of your class, you can fit these topics within your specific class, whether it's US 1, US 2, civics, world history, US history, or any other class you're teaching. It could also be part of a unit, like you could focus in on a certain part of, like World War II, for example, and have students unpack the theme. There's many different options of how you can approach History Day. It sort of depends on your goal of doing the program, and also sort of the goal, but also trying to think about what makes the most sense for me. I would always start small if you've never done History Day. Reach out to people within Fairfax County or myself to sort of walk you through the process. And after this presentation, I will be giving you a bunch of resources that you can refer to as well. Alright, so selecting and refining topics to fit the theme. I like to, after we define the topic together, and once maybe I'll choose a topic that fits the theme, and then I'll walk them through it. We'll do a think aloud on the process. I do pass out a topic sheet, which I'll show you guys in a few minutes, that has them look at 2 ideas and go into more detail. I purposely choose 2 ideas because if one doesn't turn out that great, then they have a backup as well. This is also part of the initial research process, so I also talk about different research skills of how to approach it. In the past, I've done this in my class. I've also reached out to the librarian at my school. It just depends on what your comfort is with the research process, the age of your students, and the time you have as well. Alright, so research and notes. So after they've selected a topic, and it's been approved by me, so again, they don't start any research until I've actually approved the topic. And again, the topic this year has to relate to conflict and compromise in history. I always have them start with the library, see what resources exist. I have them start with books and encyclopedias, just because that's something tangent that's in their hands. And then I have them move from secondary sources to primary sources. I also have them do electronic databases that the school offers or that the county offers later on as well. The main components when they're working on their project that they need to include, so when you review the rubric, you're going to see this as well, is that they need to understand the historical context. So the historical context means what are the events leading up to it. Okay. And then also they have to understand the theme and really develop the theme, looking at different perspectives. They can't just look at conflict through a social lens, for example. They have to look at all the different lenses of how does conflict or how does a compromise, how does it impact not just one group of people but many? What kind of ramifications or implications does it have in various ways? And then the historical context is the so what. Why are we doing this? Why are we still studying this history? Why does this person or event matter? Some ways to organize your notes include, I use Google Drive with my students. I actually have them create a folder, and I have them create documents, for example, research notes. I have them do a historical context. I have them do a theme notes. I have them do a working annotated bibliography. So again, it's up to you and how you want to structure it. These are just suggestions. Ways that you can teach note taking is you could do Power Notes, which is like a number system. So if you Google Power Notes or Power Writing, it will pull up. But 1 is like the major idea. A 2 would be like a detail, a minor detail, and then 3 would be like more specific. A 4 would be even more specific than that. Cornell method, most of you probably are familiar with that. It's a question and answers. Students create questions, and they take notes guiding that. So the questions sort of guide their research as well. These are all great ways to support students in their research process as well. All right, so with an annotated bibliography, what students need to do is throughout the research process, whenever they're researching and they refer to a source, they should be citing it. Now, annotated bibliography, there's great resources on the National History Day website, so NHD.org. You can find many resources, many examples of how to write an annotated bibliography, but essentially they have to write the source, and it can be an MLA, for example, and they have to explain what the source was and why it was important. So the annotation could be anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 sentences. As with this project, this can become very overwhelming for teachers and students, so always start small. If you're feeling overwhelmed the first year, maybe you want to limit your topics to a specific unit, or maybe have them only select designated topics that you feel comfortable with. Again, work with your colleagues at your school, the social studies specialists, and other resources to help you think through this project. Again, I'll provide you resources as well that can also help you think through the process. All right, other ideas. Definitely have benchmarks or milestones. What that means is check-in points to monitor progress and provide needed support. So every 2 weeks roughly, when I'm working with this with my students, I have check-in points, and I'm going to show you some examples of check-in points. So I actually have a conference form that I use that I'll share. You can also think about a timeline. Do you want this to be a semester project that you sort of check in every 2 or 3 weeks and they do mostly outside of school? Or do you want it to be sort of a really in-depth part of the unit you're studying, maybe 4 or 5 weeks? It just depends on you. Again, organizational component is all about having folders, whether it's hard copies or whether it's electronic. Depends on the resources you have and student needs and interests. And then there is a regional competition. So National History Day has a regional, state, and national program. So the regionals is usually early March, and it has been at Mount Vernon High School. So again, even to just have them go through the process and participate at the regional competition is a great opportunity for students to get feedback, for them to share what they've learned throughout the process as well. The top 2 can advance in each category to the state level. So the categories again would be, or are, website, paper, performance, documentary, and exhibit. And again, all those can have group components, 2 to 5 students, or they can work individually except for paper. Historical paper needs to be just an individual. Okay, so in this point, I'd be sharing a lot more documents, and I'd have hard copies, and I'd be sharing But essentially what I want you to do is, at this point, I would go through, now that you've learned a little bit about History Day, if you haven't done so already, I would go through the NHD website, and I would go through the process. So that's what I would do. And then once you've done that, come back here, and I'm going to show you some different examples of how you can use these resources. So I'm going to take a minute here, and I'm going to go through some things that I mentioned. Alright, so this is an NHD topic sheet, and this is what I give my students. So, and this is in your drive as well, or the documents being shared. Okay, so they have to convince me at the beginning what topic they're going to do. So it tells you some checklists, what makes a good topic. And I would have a discussion about this. And then, again, as I said, they choose 2 topics. So these are tentative thoughts. They have to explain in some detail how this fits the year's theme. So they do that once, and they do that a second time. Okay, the next document I have in the Google folder that's going to be shared with you is looking at model examples. On the NHD website, it does a great job in providing exemplary projects from previous grades or previous years. Now, obviously, it's not the same theme, but what the judges are looking for, what the students should be working on, is the same kind of process. So I actually have my students go through, and I set up a link where they actually have to click on exemplary projects, and they actually have to evaluate the work. What do they do well? What suggestions would you have? What ideas did you get for your project? I do this early on because this is a great way to have students also think about what category they're interested in, as well as get an understanding of what the scope of the project is. Now, I do tell my students these are exemplary projects. Okay? So if you're in the middle school, you'd be looking at the junior division. If you're looking at the high school, you'd have the senior division. Alright, next. And again, I have more examples. I have them go through 2 or 3 examples. The next one is a historical context. Again, the historical context is looking at the events leading up to the event or person and how that relates to conflict and compromise. So most likely, there would be some kind of conflict before the event or the person did something. In that sense, I have students create a timeline. Now this could be a paper timeline, this could be an online timeline. I have them write down the year or a specific date if they need to know that specific date, and then describe what happened, and then they should be able to connect it to the main event or person. So again, another resource of how to do historical context, breaking it down. Once they've done some research on the historical context, I give them this thesis sheet. Now I teach 7th and 8th grade, primarily 7th grade. So they're still at the point of really understanding what a thesis is and working on how to write a thesis. So again, this breaks it down into more detail. If you're at a higher level, you can modify this, or you can tweak it, or you can do things that you already use. I break it down into topic, theme, and then I have them write the thesis statement. And then I give examples of previous thesis statements that I thought were really good that I've seen before. Last but not least, this is what I was talking about with benchmarks and milestones. So, National History Day, I have a mini conference. So I have 3 mini conferences before the regional competition. So roughly every 5 or 6 weeks. Now I do check-in points before then because I have access to their Google folders, and I can check and give them feedback throughout the process. But this is a more formal way to give them feedback. So I have them do a lot of the legwork, doing checklists to make sure that they have the documents in the Google folder. I have them pose questions. What can I do to help them? And then I focus on their strengths and areas for improvement. So when I actually meet with them, I've already reviewed their documents, and I've already have an idea, and then I have a discussion, and then we do an action plan together. And then when we go back to the action plan, this was the first mini conference, for the second and third one, I want to see that they've actually used the action plan to inform what they do next. So that's just another process to do. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My name is Rory Dippold. I know this was very quick, but hopefully this was a good start and introduction to National History Day. Thank you so much.